California regulator to approve State Farm's 22% home insurance rate hike. But what's the catch? What's the catch? Let's get into it. Here we go.
California could soon face higher home insurance rates.
This comes after the state's insurance commission tentatively approved a request by State Farm to hike its rates by an average of 22% in the wake of the January wildfires in Los Angeles.
But as CBS 8's Richard Allen reports tonight, that provisional approval comes with some conditions.
And one of those conditions for this rate increase approval is that State Farm will not drop any existing customers at least through the end of this year. But that is not the only condition.
I think just the most important thing is for everyone to keep in mind that this is not happening tomorrow.
Carl Sussman is an independent insurance agency owner based in Los Angeles. He says he wasn't surprised that the insurance commissioner granted this tentative approval to State Farm to hike their rates.
No, it had to happen. There's no question. You have to keep in mind State Farm controls over 20% of the market share in California, and that's millions of policy. And it's not hyperbole, millions of policies.
But before this increase is officially approved, Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara says that State Farm must commit to not cancel or refuse to renew existing policies through 2025, and is also requesting that its parent company provide State Farm with $500 million to help boost its finances. State Farm will also have to prove that the request for a rate hike is justified by making their case at a public hearing. State Farm says they've been unable to charge premiums that match wildfire risk, adding that they paid out roughly $1.75 billion to 9,500 claims resulting from January's wildfires in Los Angeles, estimating the total loss to reach more than $7 billion.
I'd like to pay more money for our insurance, but the reality is the exposures that we're living with today are not matching the premiums that we're paying.
In a statement, State Farm says it's time for certainty in the California insurance market for our customers. The provisional nature of today's decision does not improve that certainty, but it's a step in the right direction. In the meantime,
They want certainty, meaning we want you, the consumer, to know that we, the provider, are going to be there for you. State Farm is there or not. Because otherwise they're saying, we're out of here. We're out of here.
Consumer Watchdog, an advocacy group that filed a challenge against State Farm's rate increase request, applauded the decision for a public hearing, calling it a victory for consumers. Executive Director Carmen Balber says the rate hike is unjustified.
This is about a pattern and practice of financial mismanagement by State Farm that depleted their bank account, and now they want California consumers to step in and bolster it again.
And that public hearing is set for April 8th. The insurance commissioner's final decision should come shortly after that.
You know, they're claiming financial mismanagement. I mean, this storyline, that ridiculous individual at the end of that last video, they're claiming financial mismanagement. I mean, you had a massive fire come through. This is a company that's been trying to pull out. All the insurance companies have been trying to pull out from California because of the mismanagement of California. That's the real problem. You got massive mismanagement in California, and wildfire risk is one of those that they have absolutely mismanaged. So then you want to try and blame it on the insurance company? Well, that's a pretty easy target because everybody hates insurance, right? Nobody wants to have to pay for insurance. But when you've got an asset as big as a house in, Pacific Palisades or Malibu or wherever, it's pretty expensive. You're not going to just, you know what? I think I'll self-insure. I think I'll just roll the dice on my $3 million home. And, if it burns down, I'll just, I'll pay for it out of pocket. Nobody's doing that. And that's just not a thing. So even if the premiums are high, they're going to take them. They're going to bend over and say, thank you. May I have another? California approved a 22% rate increase by State Farm, its largest home insurer, on Friday in response to the devastating wildfires that swept LA in January. State Farm is the California unit of the big State Farm Mutual Automobile Insurance. It grew rapidly in recent years to cover 2.8 million homeowners with more than 20% of California's market. That's why this is such a huge deal. State Farm is the biggest provider, and specifically in the markets we're talking about with the wildfires. And so if they pull out, everybody's going to have to go to that FAIR plan, right? Or have no insurance. And if you have a mortgage, you don't have that option. you don't have that option. You have to have insurance to cover the lender's side because they don't want to lend you money on a home that they're not going to be able to rebuild. And a lot of this has to do with inflation grew so rapidly, construction costs increased so exponentially, and at that same time, you had fire risk has grown exponentially from the standpoint of, well, we had a fire here, we had a fire there, we had a fire there. They can literally document, the impact of previous fires, which have been very recent, and then the probability that they're going to happen again. And no wonder these insurance companies are saying, we're out of here. Because they're basically professional gamblers, right? They gamble based on, inherent risk. And they're saying, this is a terrible risk. So if you want us to keep playing ball and gambling in your neighborhood, you got to allow us to increase these premiums. California's Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara said his approval was conditioned on State Farm justifying its needs. Have you seen any footage of the fires? Did you see how many of those structures went down? 16,000 of them went down. They're just putting these people through the paces because they want to be able to go, you know what? We had an open and transparent meeting and here's what's going on. Sorry, guys, you're going to have to come up with the 22% in premiums. You're just going to have to do that. So it was conditioned on State Farm justifying its need for the increase by bringing data to a public hearing on April 8th. That should be entertaining. He also called on the insurer to pursue a $500 million capital infusion from its parent, the auto arm of State Farm, and asked it to stop its efforts to shrink exposure by not renewing some customer policies. They're still going to do that. They're still going to do that because there are policies that are losers for them. So why would they keep them? And they're going to cut those. This is insurance. I find it, almost entertaining when people are trying to battle insurance companies and say, oh, I've been wronged. Yeah, you probably have, but what options do you have? And can you see what's going on in California that's been going on for not literally months? Because we had a whole bunch of cancellations, 1,600 in Pacific Palisades alone, I believe, by State Farm. This has been an ongoing deal, and this is not just California. I mean, you've got multiple other markets as well. You've got Texas, you've got Florida, there's a whole bunch. Anywhere where you've got major, catastrophe that's happened and is happening on an ongoing basis, well, insurance is going to say, we're going to need to analyze our risk in your market. I expect both State Farm and its parent company to meet their responsibilities and not shift the burden entirely onto their customers. Okay, he's just got to say something. He's got to just, all right, we can't stick them entirely with it, or we can't tell them that we're sticking them entirely with it. So I'm going to say something publicly. Hey, why don't you go get $500 million from your parent company? It's like, okay, yeah. How does that really make things any better for the company? State Farm, it's all one company, right? You can say, oh, it's a subsidiary. Yeah, whatever. Lara said in his announcement, currently, too many Californians live in fear of having their insurance policies non-renewed. I think Californians should know that the reason their policies are not being renewed has to do with the fact that they live in a desert that is likely to catch on fire, will in the future, and insurance looks at that risk and says, what's it going to cost for you to get a premium from us? Here's the figure. And so to me, that's what State Farm is doing. Hey, we need an increase. Here's the numbers. What those numbers are based on, I have no idea, right? No idea. No idea at all. It's time for certainty in the California insurance market for our customers. Provisional nature of today's decision doesn't improve that certainty, but it's a step in the right direction, said State Farm. We are moving forward with implementing this provisionally approved rate, and we will continue to work with the California Department of Insurance for a sustainable future for the California insurance market. That's corporate speak for just a bunch of nonsense, right? We're trying to we need some more money up in here. And California is like, good Lord, they're just jacking our people like there's no tomorrow. Never mind the fact that, could some things have mitigated the damage of said fires? Yes. Is anybody willing to take on that responsibility? doesn't appear to. When the mayor's in Ghana and Gavin Newsom's cranking up his podcast, you know what I mean? And then you're firing your fire chief and you got just a bunch of nonsense going on. I don't know if you saw this past weekend, but the state of Oklahoma City, had some massive fires, like 146,000 acres were burned, 300 homes went up in flames. But you know what you didn't hear, you didn't hear Oklahoma whining about? Was their mayor being in Ghana, because their mayor wasn't in Ghana. You know where their governor was? He was right there. I mean, he was out touring, toured a whole bunch of the devastation, and then he went and looked at his own little farm that was burned up. So, difference between a Democrat-run state and Republican-run is night and day. Geographically, there's some massive differences there as well, too. But bottom line is, everybody in Oklahoma did what they're doing, what they're supposed to do, and they're going to rebuild and go through the same thing. But you don't have this just who's on first type deal where Gavin Newsom's blaming the county's blaming the state's blaming the city's blaming no water to fight the fire. I mean, just this absolute cluster, right? Absolute cluster. You got State Farm in the midst of it. Then you had State Farm pulling out before all of this was going on. State Farm's California insurance business was troubled long before California's wildfires. It had $5.6 billion in insurance losses from 2016 to 2024. That shrank its surplus capital after its reserves for claims from $4 billion to $1 billion. So that's what's going to go on in the January or the April 8th hearing, right? Going to just go through the numbers, look what the numbers are. The insurance commissioner is going to go, oh, you're trying to stick our people with these premiums, and they're trying to put up this facade that they are sticking up for the people. If that were the case, maybe they would have done some wildfire mitigation. Maybe they would have had water in the reservoir. Just all kinds of things that probably could have been approached differently, but they weren't, and they never will be. This is California. You've got layer after layer after layer after layer of bureaucracy, and this is what happens. And insurance companies are like, nope, don't want to deal with this. This is absurd. We're out. Let's check out this guy. This is one of those other stories that was happening basically at the same time. Let's go here. Tinder date gone wrong. State Farm exec fired after saying premium hikes following California fires were kind of orchestrated. If you want to play the video, there's a good video on it out there. But what happened is he was recorded undercover by his Tinder date. What struck me is, I've got a whole podcast on it. You can watch that. And it's got the video in it. But what struck me is this is a Tinder date, right? So each individual's trying to get lucky. I mean, that's the end result of Tinder. You're not matching up this isn't Christian singles mingle, whatever that is, right? This is not that where you're trying to find a husband and go down those roads. You're just trying to get lucky on Tinder. That's the whole point. But this guy spends an enormous amount of time literally talking about his role at State Farm and, how State Farm works and how insurance works, and just a bunch of nonsense in the hopes of getting lucky. And all I could think of is, I wonder if that worked. Did that work? Did that lady say, oh yeah, worked up now? I don't think so. But this is what he had to say. Our people look at this and say, shit, we've got like maybe $5 billion that we're short if something happens. We'll go to the Department of Insurance and say, we're overexposed here. You have to let us catch up on our rates. He'll say, nah, the insurance commissioner, and we'll say, okay, then we're going to cancel these policies. That's exactly the back and forth you've got. So for being transparent in his Tinder date, who illegally recorded him or unauthorized recorded him, he got canned. He added that there should have never been houses built in the first place in areas like Pacific Palisades. Oh, okay. Yeah. Given the fire risk, saying that residents brought natural areas around them for the ego, but the area is an effing desert, and so it dries out, and it's a tinderbox. that makes sense. And that's what State Farm has been saying. And that's why State Farm has been saying, oh, yeah, I don't think so. On top of all the policies that the Insurance Commission in California has, which hasn't allowed the insurance companies to basically get their increases, their premium increases up to the point where they match the market, where they match the increased cost with rebuild and they match the risk associated with what we know is fires are coming. Oh, there it is. It's coming down the mountain. And then it, burned up, all the stuff we saw in LA. He did claim that the date was a setup. Said it was a setup. Interesting way to set somebody up. Hey, let's send out a hot chick. I don't know if she was hot or not. Let's send out a hot chick and put her on her Tinder date. Get one of these executives. We'll just see what he says. See what he says. And that's what he said. I think it'd be hard to set that up, but it did seem like that. It was just a bizarre deal. Bizarre deal. He believes it was a setup. State Farm released a statement in response to the video release stating that the individual in the video is no longer associated with State Farm. So, your word to the wise, if you are a high-ranking executive with a major insurance company, maybe don't blab about your nonsense on a first Tinder date. You know what I mean? Especially if it's something as hot topic as this. I'm talking about it, right? As hot topic as this, that's not going to probably work out well for you. The footage was interesting though. So check out that other podcast I had. And just to kind of bring everything back in together, Insurance Commissioner Laura introduced insurance reforms at the end of 2024. But that was just a week before fires touched off more than $40 billion in catastrophe losses for the insurers. January's fires exhausted the Fair Plan's coffers. The Fair Plan is toast. They're just going to have to get some kind of huge infusion in there, right? And that comes in the forms of the other companies kicking in. Do they have it? Who knows? We're going to find out. In seeking its emergency 22% rate hike, State Farm said California units faces insolvency and threatened to pull out of the state. So that's the back and forth, right? Hey, we're out of here. You don't give us what we want, we're out of here. In California, the elected officials, the insurance commissioner, they can't have that because State Farm is such a big player, specifically with the fire policy in LA. And that's the hot topic. Everywhere else, I mean, it's going to go up as well. Insurance rates are just going to go through the roof, as they have been, right? As they have been. Doesn't matter where you are. Doesn't matter where you are, what kind of home you have, or, what the deal is. Premiums are going up. My insurance has gone up on just about everything. Liability insurance, you name it. Just everything has gotten more expensive because inflation was raging and all that crazy stuff happened. And here we are. So what will happen April the 8th? Insurance Commission will sit down with State Farm and they'll go through a bunch of really boring PowerPoint presentations. They'll give them the 22% rate, but they will have, they'll have a couple of small nicky-knack, type provisions within the rate hike and that they can go back to consumers and say, we really tried for you. We really believe in you and we want to get the best deal for you. We don't want to have these huge insurance companies who are financially mismanaged, even though you had a $40 billion worth of damage losses for the insurers. It's like, what exactly do you want them to bring to the meeting other than a big picture of the fires that were going on? I think we all remember that, right? I mean, it's like talking about the cost to put a car back together, and you're looking at a picture of just an absolutely crunched car, and somebody's saying, well, I need you to come up with why you think this car should be fixed. Why should this car be fixed? Tell us why. It's like, well, are you not looking at it? Did you not watch the wildfires happen when they did? Because that tends to impact insurance companies because they're the ones with the policies on the line. To me, it's a bunch of politics going back and forth, right? So 22% increase, you betcha. That will happen for sure. With some provisions, this is just stringing it out so that the consumer public can go, okay, yeah, our insurance commissioner isn't really fighting for us. All right, that's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. Catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.